Welcome to Future Hidden Movie Gems. Today we're talking about Beau is Afraid. If I could just do his like yell when he sees the giant monster. That would probably be my reaction too, just like utter dread and horror. No, there was a moment though that got me and just from complete terror, which is that spider. I mean,
when it crawls on that guy's face and then he's like that's so insane, bro.
yeah.
I would never be able to just live ever again if I was looking up and there's just a dude in my bathroom like on the ceiling sweating and then just with a freaking brown recluse on his face and drops on me.
Oh my gosh, I know I would lose it. Oh no. No, no, no. Yeah, I still have like nightmares from doing pest control all those summers, and then one of my managers showed me his back and he has this giant scar where a brown recluse, he was cleaning down the spider webs and a brown recluse fell down his shirt, down his arm, and then it bit him on the back and he didn't get it taken care of quick enough, and so he just like, eats away at your like skin and bone, and so just like he has a huge nasty scar. Just I just love this movie.
Wait, my
It's
quote
so
is
good. Oh yeah, sorry.
drink
And
this
my co-host Cameron.
drink this paint with me. What
Okay.
the fudge is wrong with that girl? She died,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean the mom, and Cameron was laughing so hard. Cameron just
It was the randomest thing ever. I was thinking like she's gonna like sniff it or like maybe take a sip and be like, oh, I'm like woozy because she was like trying to get high or whatever. And then she's like, I'm
well, okay.
talking downing the pain.
Earlier she made a threat, said I'm gonna tear up my hair, and I thought
Yeah.
she was bluffing, but she was not bluffing. This chick is
She
like,
is not the bluffing type. What the
no.
fudge is that daughter, bro?
I'm gonna kill myself. She kills herself. And then okay, so the build up to her mom giving her CPR and then having like blue paint around her lips and then running for the sword, me and Cameron burst out laughing.
It
It
was
is
insane.
it's just
She's
like
just and he's just ah! And he
smashes
jumps
to the
through
ground.
the glass window or the glass door. I'm like, what is going
It,
on?
and it was like at times it was nervous laughter. Like I could hear the people behind us like like
Yeah, they were
laughing
all
because
like,
like stressed out, but like it's so over the top. It's like you can't help but laugh just because of how crazy it is.
yeah,
And just so the audience knows, I don't think I've heard Cameron say "What the fudge is happening" more in a movie in my entire life than that movie. Literally
yeah.
looked over to me and he started saying it out loud so everybody could hear.
What's it called? This did surpass Enemy in the amount of times I said "what the fudge." Like, and when in Enemy, to put in perspective, I said it for like a million times, and then like I had to stop the movie 45 minutes into it, and I just turned around and I said, I don't understand what I'm watching. What is going on? Do you understand anything? And Graham was like, no, I have literally no idea what's going on. And I was like, okay, at least we're on the same page. And then I kept it going. Yeah, I'll just get in right into what it was like watching. It's wild. I kind of talked to Jordan about this after watching it all. I kind of was like, oh, I'm overwhelmed. And just like my initial rating of it would be like a 3 out of 10. The more I've talked about it, the more I've enjoyed it. I would say at least right now it's at like a 5, maybe. It's hard because there's so many moments that I'm like, this is an 8 and it's so good. But then there's also so many moments that I'm like, was that necessary? I'm also so uncomfortable. Like every time they showed like the stabbing guy, I'm like, is this necessary for me to see this guy? Please, please, I don't need to see this dude's. Like, I'm like, it literally just show like a upper half. I'm aware of that. It's been mentioned multiple times. I was like, you don't need to show that. But yeah, watching it, this movie reminds me a lot of the girl with the dragon tattoo, only in pacing. Just because the
Hmm.
girl with the dragon tattoo, I almost feel like it's 3 separate films where it's like with this movie I felt like the first film of the first like hour 15 of this is just like it's almost like a cyberpunk future that's crazy, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of like Blade Runner or like Dread, just like an insane society where just like
I almost feel like
kind
there's
of
four because it the first one's at his apartment, and then being trapped with the creepy family, and then the village people, and then the ending
That's
insanity.
true. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So essentially like the first half is just like dread, like cyberpunk, like future with like anarchy. Dude, in that fetching scene where that guy's chasing after him to his door and he's running as fast as he
Or
can
I
to
love
get to
he
his
gets his
door.
soup, it's hot. And he just like hucks it.
Yeah. And then he just makes eye contact with Beau and Beau's falling. He just rinses the door and locks it. I love how that's like that little lock is like what is keeping him safe. I'm like, bro, if these people want to do their and what they do it later is smash through it. I'm like, you
Yeah.
are not safe. This is such a false insecurity. So yeah, and then like the second half is like it's almost like a Get Out. I
Mm,
kind of remind me of Get Out, like, oh no, everything's fine, and like weird
yeah.
people, like the guy running at him in the yard, like
Yes.
just things like that, where I'm like, this is like Get Out, and then after that, it's just like it almost reminded me of like Midsommar,
Yeah, back to Midsummer.
yeah, and I was like, this is really weird, and then the ending is like Truman Show. I'm like, what
and
the fuck?
and
What is
Hered-
real?
it reminds me of Hereditary too, because there's a very similar, like inside this home and up in the attic, there's like all sorts
Mm,
of crazy evil witchcraft crap.
yeah, yeah. This was just, I was like, what is like it that's and so that's why it was just kind of a lot for me to process. There's certain parts of the movie that I love. Like I think the first third of it, honestly, the first half, like the first two parts, I think are so good. I think the in the home and then also in his apartment, I think both of those like those whole kind of plot lines are so good and so intriguing. You lost me with the Midsommar like play. I was like, what the freak is going on? And then it's like, oh, these are my sons. And it's like, where's
Wait,
your? I'm like,
I'll die if I sleep with her, and then like so. Wait, then
how
how?
are you alive? I'm like, I'm just more and more confused the more you guys talk.
And then everybody in the
Please
theater
stop.
laughed. I mean, people laughed so much in this movie. Like it's amazing. I feel it reminded me a little bit of Mulholland Drive, just like it's so bizarre and yet it made me feel so many things. Like in
Mhm.
Mulholland Drive, there was moments where I felt like utter terror, but I couldn't understand why. And it's just because like he's so good at filmmaking. Like it's like he can make you feel things even though you're like, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's like accurate like description because there's so many scenes where just like Jordan mentioned, especially with the audience, like you don't know how to react because like with the lady running for the sword, it's just like you're in like shock from this girl drinking paint and killing herself, but then it's like it's funny because of how over the top it is and her like eyes are bulging,
Yeah.
and then but then like and then the lady's like trying to give her CPR and you're like this is kind of messed up, and then she like runs to grab the sword and you're like what the fudge, and it's like turned into like a thriller slasher, and then he like runs through the glass like almost comedically, like there's so many different, that's what I talked to Jordan about. Is like there's so many conflicting, I felt like themes, and it's
Mm.
genreless, so that's why it was almost like difficult for me. But at the same time, it's like I also can appreciate how it's impressive to be able to like weave those all together. I think it was he had me until the play. I was like really lost, and then the final the final half, I was just like I was really uncomfortable with the like when the mom is just standing there, it reminded me of Green Knight with the
Yes.
grandma in the corner. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, the
Oh.
mom just watched all that. I'm so uncomfortable in so many ways. And then her like her sending him up, and then there's just a giant monster. I'm like, what the fuck? And his brother who's like got like a dog bowl. I'm like, what the fudge is going on in this family?
Yeah.
Also, a couple of weird flashbacks where I got low key weird. Me and Jordan were talking about after like weird mom son vibes where I'm like, this is really weird. But it
Well,
just ends up she's just extremely possessive, I think.
maybe. Yeah, it's so interesting because like yeah, trying to make sense of this movie is impossible, but like the fun part is like you can either try to find interpretations of it. I just love listening to an interview with Ari Aster, and he just said that it's just literally a physical representation of just all the fears. I mean, maybe his fears, but just it's a perfect visual representation of fear and different of like everything, because like but amplified so high it's like unrealistic.
Yeah.
So because sometimes we jump to like the worst possible scenario, and this movie is that. It's like, what if this happened? And it's like, yes,
What if
that's
a dude stayed in my house after all these people? Like, what if someone stole my keys? Dude, okay. See, but that's the thing is there's like so many crazy things that, and like for example, the people sliding the papers under the door that never gets explained. I'm so creeped out by that. I'm like, if
yeah,
someone was doing that to me, I would walk out of that house with a gun every single day. Because like someone
yeah,
sliding
turn down
papers
your
under your door,
music.
turn down your music, and you're like, and especially like the last one, it's sliding all the way. I'm like, what the fudge is going on? And then like someone stealing his keys, stealing his
Suitcase.
suitcases, and the fetching electrician, you're effed. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Why did you just say that? Are you in on this? Like, is
Yeah.
everyone in on this? Like, is this a scheme? Like,
Well, just him, and then I love he took a pill and it says, make sure you drink
drink with water.
water. And then he's like trying to turn it, and then of course the water's not working, none of the taps. And so he also, I love that shot when he looks out the window and there's just like almost like a beam of
Halo.
light.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the water. And so then he runs across the street, gets it. And the guy, help me, help
Help
me,
me,
help
help
me.
me, help me, help me, help me.
He's like chasing him across the street.
And
And
I
then I
love how you
just
can see him out the window, just like mouthing.
And then I love he's like counting in the pennies, trying to make, and all of a sudden he looks over at his house and like people are starting to file in, like every single person on the street is going inside his house.
And then fetching, they all use his house. He sleeps out on the construction next to seeing his house. And then freaking the people are just gone. And like, and then a person is like left over hiding up in his bathroom above his tub. And there's also a brown recluse that crawled on this guy's face. And then he falls into the tub with Beau. And the way that Beau finds out that he's above him is a drop of sweat because the guy can't hold it any longer. I'm like, how long have you been up there? It's insane. Like it's the type of stuff that I'm like,
Oh,
in the writing room, people must have just been like, Ari, what are you saying? He's like, so
yeah.
then the guy's above him. Wait,
Yes.
how did the guy he's stayed up there for hours?
One of my favorite things he said is, because he made two movies that got him a lot of attention, and
Yeah.
then he said this. So the studios, trusted him to make this next film, and now he's like, I probably just burnt out, that my one chance to make a movie that he
That's
had
hilarious.
complete free reign to just do whatever he wanted.
That's funny. No, yeah. It's and then I mean, the scene where the mom slides him the paper that's under the cup that says stop incriminating yourself. I'm like, what the fudge does that even mean? Stop incriminating myself? Like what? And then the
Yeah.
sister's like the wackest person in the world.
Oh
He's
my
like, I
gosh.
don't mind switching, sleeping on the couch.
She is as evil as the girl from I know you haven't seen it, but The Well. The girl does the same thing to this missionary boy. She gets him to smoke some weed and she takes a picture. And so she can like, you think she's gonna blackmail him or whatever and send it back to his family. And it's just like it like these girls are so evil. I'm gonna pull up my hair unless you smoke this. And like and I'll tell him you did it. And it's just like those are the kind of things that like literally would be your worst
Oh, it's
nightmare.
just so much anxiety. Like it
Yes.
reminds me of Black Mirror, that episode,
Yeah.
the blackmail episode. I'm just like, I'm so stressed out right now. And Beau's just like, I don't even know who you are, little girl. Like, what the fudge?
But I thought that was a perfect comparison, get out to the section where he's in the house with that, because there's that off feeling being with that dad, especially because he's just like, oh shoot,
Oh,
I
someone
gotta,
just called
somebody
him.
just
An
called, they got to do a
emergency
surgery. I
surgery.
can't take you today, but we can do it tomorrow.
Let's be
And
honest. Was anyone on the other side of that call? Let's be honest. Was anyone on the other side of that call?
I
Dude, I
know.
would have started questioning so many things. I'd just been like, oh no worries. Okay. And then I just freaking ran for my life, bro. And then they would sent that freaking that veteran Terminator after you. Oh my gosh, that guy was insane.
What I love about the ending, especially, like I know you said that weird like moment where he had this long imagination of his whole life. It felt to me, it felt very religious. And I
Mm.
know it's kind of maybe a weird thought, but just this idea of like, well, especially the end kind of felt like Judgment Day, like, because I feel like so many people have that fear of like, well, what have I done with my life, and did I do it the right way? And
Mm.
especially as you get getting closer to the end of your life, like, I mean, I'm not there yet, I hope, but I imagine that like you're just, I mean, the older I get, I do look back on my life and I'm like, oh, these decisions, like, could I have done things better? Uh, I don't know. It's just it's an interesting idea and concept. So
Mm.
I I love it.
I'm interested on your perspective on the whole on the final like Truman Show section of the film, like because it also reminded me of the Black Mirror of when the lady's like being punished for her crime of like like abusing the children or whatever, and then she like has to be chased and like taking photos of her. That's
Oh,
what it
that's
kind of
right.
reminded me of as well. It was like that and Truman Show together, where it was like Beau is going through this because he's being judged. And I
I,
like obviously like you said, like it's an interpretation of his fears of like being judged by all these people and like all his deepest, darkest secrets being made known to the public would
yeah.
just be terrible. But like I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that like section.
Well, and it's like it's almost a perfect representation of like people, like nothing is really secret anymore. Like everything is basically shouted from the rooftops. It's like I mean, all your whole life story is on social media, and they can just
Mhm.
pull that up and be like, "Hey, look at all these horrible things you've done and said." And it's just so I don't know, but it's kind of that times a million, because there's like literally, and what's very interesting to me is like it's an actual physical representation of actual people in an audience, whereas like those people, if they were just all behind their computers in their homes, that's basically just as big of an
Mm,
audience. So I
that's interesting.
there's so many different things you can interpret from it. Like I love that he literally drowned, and it is kind of like showing that he was physically, I mean, mentally drowning from all the stuff that was being hit at him and thrown at him, and just like, but you actually see him drown, which is really funny because it's like he is both emotionally and physically drowning.
Mm.
Um,
I
so
also think it's super interesting just the fact that like I was just looking at the title now and like Beau is afraid and just like the fact that everything kind of like you're talking about every single thing in the movie is like it like is everyone's worst fear.
yes, yeah, like
Like
everything
I
down to the spider, like the brown recluse. I thought that was just a nice little touch in it. Like just like there's perfect representations of everything you've ever worried about times a million. Honestly, for me, this movie was therapeutic because like I have all these kinds of fears in not all at once, but just like all the time. I relate a lot to like Charlie Kaufman movies, especially adaptation, when it's just like, and I thought this was it reminded me a little bit of it. It's just, but this is, you can see it more. Adaptation is a lot like he's in his head constantly. This movie is like, no, this is like actually happening. So um I felt like by the end, like we talked about, it's more interpretive, and but the beginning, it's you can actually see it more clearly. Like it still plays a somewhat coherent story.
yeah,
Um
because that's why I don't know because that's why at the end like the second half that's why I struggle with it because that's the same it's the same reason I struggled with Nope and not Get Out and Us.
yes,
It's because
interesting.
I felt like Get Out and Us both were like the first half of this movie where it's like it's a film that you're like wow this is
Oh,
crazy and
I
then you
wouldn't
keep
compare it to
enjoying it.
Nope. I'd compare it to Us, because the ending of Us is just bananas crazy.
Yeah, but like but because like Get Out is just like it's so tight knit and perfect, but then it's like there's so much to interpret after.
Yeah.
Whereas like with Us and also Nope, it's like it's almost too much trying to like leave up for interpretation that it's like it's forgetting that its primary purpose is to like entertain. And so it's like that for me, that's why I kind of struggle with it is I'm like it's like trying too hard to like make it art and be like this is interpretation, like interpret how you want. I'm like you also still have to make a coherent story so that I understand what's going on, you know?
Yeah, what was Alex Garland's movie that came out that similar, had a crazy bananas ending? He did the um oh, we love the,
Ex Machina,
no, that was a good one.
Annihilation.
Annihilation was also good, but then it was his third film that,
Men.
yeah, Men. See, this one felt a lot
I
like
thought
Men.
of that, Jordan, when they had like the when like the at the opening scene, it's just like him being born. I'm like, what the fudge is going on?
Yeah,
And then also at the end with like the giant like monster, I was like, is this just literally men? Like,
yeah. Well, and it's so funny that he has all these crazy bananas endings because you think Midsummer and that crazy cult and just lighting everybody. Man, I'm spoiling. Sorry, lighting everybody on fire. But just and then the ending of Hereditary also, Cameron, is just as bananas. Like there's like a floating severed head body and just like this whole cult. Basically, yeah, Midsummer as well.
it was funny. I was talking about it with Lindsay Barlow, and she said that with LB, and she was like, "It just makes me worry about sometimes with movies like this. I just think the director might need some help. Like, are they okay? Like, she's like, when people make movies like this, it always makes me worry about them. Like, are they okay? People who consistently make movies like that. I'm like, Ari Aster definitely needs some mental health.
I know. I know. I'm excited to hear too what inspiration he took from, because you can totally see it in Hereditary that he took inspiration from Rosemary's Baby, and then with Midsummer, with The Wicker Man. They're basically like remakes, but
Mm,
the right way to make a remake, which isn't
yeah,
like beat for beat or scene for scene. It
it's like
was like,
interpret it.
yeah, it's just like a very similar. It's kind of like he's got all the same beats, but then he filled it in to make his own vision style.
Yeah.
And he's got style coming out of his ears.
You got
So,
style. You have to admit, Dumbledore's got style. No, but and that's the thing that the one thing I did appreciate that this is the reason why this is much better than Green Knight is because like kind of like I mentioned where it's like you have to also make it somewhat coherent. At least majority of the things like made somewhat sense. Like when the people are acting crazy, it's like okay, these people are just crazy potentially
mm.
instead of just being like the randomness of Green Knight. Like what's his name? You're like, and he's like seconds after saying, I want you to like, he's like, I want you to like my daughter to have your kid. I'm like, what the fudge is going on? Like, there's just no linear anything going on. It's just
Yeah.
like random lines and act like in scenes that I'm like, are any of these like coherently together? I don't know, things like that I'm like, I don't
It's so
understand.
interesting that I feel like all these upcoming directors have like their third film that's just completely out there. Like their first two films is like, oh, they've got a following. They're like, all right, this is what I actually wanted to do. Hopefully, I'll keep my audience.
Yeah, that's actually so true. Cause like, it's like you're talking about with Alex Garland and then also this.
Hmm.
And even what's it called? Isn't Bone Tomahawk? What's his name's third? Because
Uh,
isn't it dragged across concrete, cell block, and then Bone Tomahawk?
Bone Tomahawk was his first film.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, he's reversed because he's Psycho the first, and then the second two are good. What the fudge, dude?
This was one of the best double features I've done. I mean, they're complete opposite films. Like you
Since
gotta
Nightcrawler and Fury.
no, but yeah, this and The Covenant, I seriously had such a good time watching these movies. And even if you didn't like absolutely love this movie, Cameron, it was so fun to watch it with you because you were just laughing so
That
many times so
there
hard.
was so many. That's what's it called? And that probably also just goes to Ari Aster and his like style. Um, him similar to Edgar Wright and even I would say Guy Ritchie, they just really know how to use I think editing for humor, which is impressive.
Mm,
So I think like that's a really hard skill to kind of master is to be able to use like they almost use editing as like the physical humor. It's crazy. Like just the way that they edit and you just like see and just to see people's reactions. Like
yes.
that scene with like the she just finishes and you should immediately cut to like a long shot of her running to the wall to grab the sword and you're like and then just like immediately cuts back to Beau and he's like and just, like I love how every single time something crazy happens, you see him and you see him in his like his frozen state with like his like arms out like this. He's like,
Yeah,
oh,
we forgot to talk about his performance.
oh
Amazing.
yeah. I mean,
Joaquin
Joaquin's a
Phoenix.
weirdo, but he's
Oh
like,
my
there's a
gosh.
reason he's so amazing.
Yeah, I mean, ever since Joker, I mean, I've just been totally on the bandwagon of his movies. I mean,
Yeah.
his old movies are great, but man, he is really going for it these days.
Yeah, because I mean, yeah, amazing Gladiator,
Yeah.
amazing in Signs.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think his best performance is his Joker. I mean, he's amazing in her, and he plays
Oh
like
my
a
gosh.
much more subtle character, which I did not expect. Like, especially for someone who's usually like sinister or just like really out there weird, to just play like kind of a quirky guy, and like he's just out there with his like idea of love and just more of a lonely character. But yeah, no, Joaquin is holy cow, he's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't even remember anyone else in this movie besides all I can see is that fetching dad who does the voice of Timon.
Yeah.
That's all I was thinking the entire time. Like, effing Timon is a serial killer. Like, what the fudge is going
But
on?
he was like perfect in that
He
role.
was.
You
It,
just
it it was very reminiscent of the dad from Get Out. I would have voted for Obama for a third term if I could have. It's just scenes. It's things like that where you're just like, so uncomfy. And then there's the scenes with like the sister, and then also with like the veteran that reminded me of like talking with like the black lady in Get Out, where she's like, no, 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 no,
yeah.
no, 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 and you're like, uh, okay,
You
I'm
know,
gonna go.
and another part that because there'd be so many times in this film that I'm like, oh my gosh, like this reminds me of so many other films that I love. Just for example, Memories of Murder, and the scene where there's like layers, I feel like, of stories being told at the same time. Like you got in the background, like there's the drunk cop, and then up in the front, they're discussing the case. And in this film, you got him talking to his uh not his mom, but the guy that says you need to get back here soon for your
Yeah,
mother's
I think the
funeral.
lawyer or something like that.
Yeah, and then in the background you got that crazy army guy. So I just felt like it's so fun. You got two stories going on at once.
Yeah, I do think it's really interesting. Yeah, like when directors are able to like layer almost like the scene where it's like you have two different things going on, and you're like it's conflicting your like attention,
Yeah.
and so you're like trying to figure out like which one's more
Yeah,
important.
which one
Like,
exactly? Because I was like, clearly this one, the crazy guy isn't as important, but it was almost funnier. So I was like watching that, and I'm like, but I wanted to know because it was like a more serious moment that he was
yeah, and like
having.
and it's more like dialogue focus and less like actions like happening.
Yeah. But it's like he's always got his eye on the guy though, because it's like, is this guy gonna like attack me or something?
Because yeah, the amount of times where oh he's harmless, he'll regret it, he'll be shameful in the
Oh
morning.
yeah, that was the other part that made you laugh so hard was he comes running in the room and the guy's like holding him and he's got all these needles in him and he's like, he's fine.
Oh, he's gonna regret this in the morning. He's like stabbing like the seventh injection in his neck. He's like, what the fudge?
That's so good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think see for me, and the more and I mean now for me it's Beau is out of 6. It's
What?
slowly going up and up, but
And I'm
I
curious
think the
what.
first half is an 8 for me, and then I think the Midsommar section is I would say like a 2 or 3, and then the final one is more like I'd say like 4 or 5. There was just like a lot going on, but like at the same
Yeah,
time, still like okay, I it's a lot better. I
that's
just yeah,
that's so interesting because I loved
the
that
Midsommar.
memory stuff. No, the play. I just thought it was so cool
Yeah,
looking. I just loved the style, and it it was kind of it did feel like a completely different film. And I mean, it was almost a completely different story. It had nothing to do with his story.
yeah.
He was just daydreaming the whole time. It was great. Um, oh, but I love too when they're intertwining his flashbacks with what was going on in the bed, and then I just love when he's curled up in the corner of the room and he's just sitting there, and then he wakes up the next morning, he's still sitting there, and it's just like,
And see, and that's when you can tell they're psychos because their reaction isn't like, "Oh, is everything?" Good?" They're like, "Good morning, how's it going?" I'm like, he just fell asleep in a corner, horrified, and they're just like. It also was insane when he sees it on the TV and she's like, "Turn to channel 78," and it's just like a
oh,
video. It's a video of him and
yes. Cameron,
the
did that
security
remind you of
camera.
Midsummer when they're looking at the it's not a tapestry, but like the things they had sewn and drawn? It was literally the whole film right there.
Oh yeah.
And then this movie, he was fast forwarding and it was going
And then it
through.
was also showing the film. Yeah. I when he started fast forwarding, I'm like, My brain's starting to hurt. This is a
Yeah,
little too trippy for me.
but there was all the moments, Cameron, were literally things you saw later in the film, which I thought was really cool. Because I
That
was
is
like,
good.
I'm like, I want to capture a couple of these moments. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then later when those moments happened, I'm like, it literally was showing us the very end. And that scene actually reminded me a lot of Michael Haneke's Funny Games, because there's a moment when the killers, they take up the remote control and pause and rewind, and it's showing you like, oh, they have complete control over this story. There's no hope.
Mm.
And it's so interesting when like it was so good. There's moments like that. I'm like it kind of puts the hairs in the back of your neck stand up, but like at the same time, you're like, you can't help but laugh because of how crazy it is.
Yeah,
It's so weird. It's so weird to like feel both of those emotions at the exact same time.
it is very strange. And I mean, yeah, I don't know. Like it like my emotions about this are as conflicting as like or like my feelings about this are as conflicted as like the emotions I felt while watching it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. There was moments like that for me, but then again, I mean, I enjoyed every minute of it because I'm just like, there's not going to be probably any film like this ever again, or has there ever been? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm all for it because yeah, we won't
Yeah, I
see.
don't know. I'm more prone. I like for would we recommend? It would definitely would be a very select person. I would like
Yeah,
I would maybe recommend this to Drew. Like just because it's one of those things where it's like the more I talk about it and the more I think about it, the more I like appreciate it. But it's one of those things similar to Enemy, where like I had to watch video essay, or talk about it with somebody, and for me to even be like, was that even worth my time? And
yeah,
I was like, oh wow, that's actually like incredible.
yeah.
But
And then you end up loving it even more. Enemy is a perfect example because like at first time I watched it, I was like, what was the point? And
I'm
I
like,
didn't
what? I
understand
just wasted
anything.
an hour and 40
Yeah.
minutes of my life, and
And
I'm
now I
never getting back.
absolutely love it. Like
Yeah.
after like people analyzed it to death, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great.
And it's funny that the final scene with like the giant like monster, it reminded me of Enemy just in the fact where
I,
when he walks in the room and it's that giant spider, and you're like, it's like that
yes.
shock factor of like, what the fudge is that?
Yeah. Well,
There's
and
also there was I was like so stimulated. I didn't even know like because like you see this kid who's his brother who's like with the bull, and then you hear like a monster in the corner, and then some dude bursts through the window and it's the veteran army veteran. I'm like, what is going on?
uh, well, it was almost perfect because it's like, how could you possibly explain or give an explanation of like
This
something that
movie.
would make sense of the rest of the film? Because like when the lady was monologuing and she was talking about how horrible he is as a son, I'm like, yeah, is there anything that can like live up to the hype that this film has built? Because it's like there's been so much. Could there be a logical explanation to this? And so that's
Mhm.
why when you see the creature up in the attic, it's almost like, oh, yes, there couldn't be anything logical or anything that would make sense, you know?
Yeah.
It's
Because
just
yeah, I was like, did the mom plan all this? Is this just a giant scheme? Like what? And
it's a
for someone,
giant
see,
something.
yeah, see, for someone like I don't mind ambiguity,
Hmm.
but I at least need a direction. When you just leave me with like, I don't even know what questions to ask because there's too many, that's when I'm like, I don't know what to do.
I love too every time like when somebody is feeling like and you can feel as an audience member suffocating, he quite literally like grabs her by the neck and then starts choking her.
Should have
It's
killed
just
her. Should have
like
killed her. Should have killed her.
I mean, didn't she die and then they were in hell or heaven or whatever that was? Like, I mean, or like judging him because she like choked and then she fell over and like
Oh,
smashed
she
into.
died. She
I
did
think she
die. I
died.
totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh wow. I just realized that.
Then he rode off on the boat and then
And she was alive because he. Oh my.
he might have actually been in heck. I don't know. Like I said, this
What the
film.
fudge? I can't shout out to the therapist for being a double agent and then just watching her get murdered. He's just like,
And he's smiling the whole time. It's so creepy. Oh, and then another thing I just have to give a quick nod to, and I thought was so funny, is this idea because especially like and I mentioned religion too before, is like a lot of that is taught like, oh, if you sleep with somebody, like that's a sin, that's not okay. And so this movie, the mom literally teaches her son, you will die
You
if you sleep with
die.
anybody. And
That's
that's
so
it's
interesting.
so funny because then
And then he does it, and then he
she
goes to
dies.
hell.
And
And then and he goes to hell.
yeah, it's so interesting because it's like it's almost like your worst
My mind's
fears.
exploding right now.
Yeah, and it's so funny because it's like, oh no, because it's kind of poking fun at it. It reminds me a little bit of what was the Swiss Army Man? Remember when the mom tells him like if you do that, like babies die or something like that. It just tells him like something crazy. And then it's
Oh
just
yeah, yeah.
yeah. And so it's just it's funny like what
I
parents
also just oh
will
no go.
tell us. No, I was just saying what parents will tell us or what religion will tell us. And then that we live in this constant fear, like, oh, God's looking out over me and stuff. And so there's just this,
Mm,
and that's what this film kind of, because like I said, it covers all the different fears, like everything from did I live my life right? And um, I mean, down to the littlest things, like we mentioned, the spider. So it's just really fun that I feel like they hit all the notes. And
that's so interesting. I don't know. Yeah, I'm just enjoying it more just talking about it. But I also didn't even I was wondering where the mom from the house was from, Amy Ryan. She's from The Office. She's Michael Scott's wife. What's her name?
oh, really?
What's her name in The
Holly?
Office? Holly, yeah.
Oh, Holly. Yeah. I thought you were talking about Beau's mom.
No, no,
Oh,
she
Cameron.
was.
And then they had a moment of The Shining where he's looking at the photo on the wall of her, and then it zooms in, and you see
And
one
it's
of the people is the guy that the creepy dude, the Timon.
yes.
Yeah. I
I
thought
was
for a
like,
second you didn't catch that because you didn't react to
oh
it.
no, I didn't know that that was Timon. That was Timon?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was Nathan Lane? No
Yeah, it
way.
zoomed in and he was up in the top right hand corner. I was trying to point that out to you. I'm like, Cameron, look. And then you were like, what? And I'm like, oh, it's gone.
I
Because
didn't even notice that. That's insane.
yeah, similarly, it does that in The Shining where it like zooms in and then Jack Torrance is right there. Jack Nicholson. You're like, oh,
Mhm.
he was there before my brain. So he
No,
was
yeah.
one of her employees. So,
So that's yeah, that's I'm interested too, is because everyone that was involved with her or worked for her, like
and it's like he was being watched his whole life, all the time, everything. It's like he couldn't escape his mom. And the fun part too is like you don't know what was real and what like she fabricated or like because literally the girl turns into a puppet. So it's like, oh, did somebody actually die or was that just a doll the whole time? Like I don't know, because this mom was basically running the whole show. Like
I'm questioning everything.
I know. It's great. But Cameron, do we recommend this? Oh yeah, to select people. That's right. We mentioned that.
Yeah, select people.
And yeah, there's
And then I'll just real quick blaze through what I've seen.
yeah,
So I watched Wonder Woman Bloodlines, 5 out of 10. It was all right. Superman Man of Tomorrow, 6 out of 10. It was pretty good. Superman Red Sun, 8 out of 10. It was really solid. And it was like violent as frick. And Superman murdered Vladimir Putin, or not
w-
Vladimir Putin. What's his name? Like the old USSR leader, whatever. But yeah, pretty insane. And then just looking forward to watching Ted Lasso, and then potentially watching
yes.
the Flashpoint Paradox, and then also I need to finish Perfect Blue.
I'm looking forward to rewatching Beau is Afraid with my wife.
You're crazy. I might recommend it to Drew though.
Peace, everybody.
Peace.